California state court trial opened on Monday to determine whether Instagram and YouTube harmed a woman's mental health through allegedly addictive app design, testing whether big tech can be held liable for damage to children and teens as well. Meta and YouTube face scrutiny as opening statements began on February 9th in a case that could set a precedent for the California courts and set a new standard of accountability across the social media industry.
Meta platforms and YouTube face legal scrutiny over allegations their platforms are fueling a youth mental health crisis as the national debate about kids' screen time enters a new phase. Meta and YouTube are defendants in a trial in California state court, where opening statements began on February 9th, in a case that could have a lasting impact on the social media industry. A 20-year-old woman identified as KGM says the attention-grabbing design of the platforms got her addicted to them at a young age, according to court filings. She alleges the apps fueled her depression and suicidal thoughts, and she is seeking to hold the companies liable. The woman's lawyers aim to show that the companies were negligent in their design of the apps, that they failed to warn the public about the risks, and that the platforms were a substantial factor in her injuries. YouTube, which is owned by Google parent Alphabet, and Meta, which owns Instagram and Facebook, both plan to defend themselves from the claims by pointing to other factors in KGM's life, while laying out their work on youth safety and trying to distance themselves from users who upload harmful content. Under U.S. law, internet companies are largely shielded from liability for material their users post. If the jury in this case rejects that defense, it could pave the way for other lawsuits claiming the platforms are harmful by design. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg is expected to take the witness stand during the trial, which could run into next month. TikTok and Snap settled with KGM before the trial. Attorney Colin Walke is a partner and head of the cybersecurity and data privacy practice at Hall Estel. He is not involved in the case, but is tracking it closely.
Settlements, don't necessarily indicate guilt or any of those sorts of things, but it does certainly show that TikTok does not want this type of information to come out at trial and for them to be judged on the merits of the case. It might also indicate, on the flip side of that coin, to be fair, that the plaintiffs realize there are some arguments to be had on the side of the tech companies that might ultimately prevail as a legal matter.
Companies are dealing with more than 2,300 similar lawsuits filed by parents, school districts, and state attorneys general in federal court. The judge overseeing those is weighing the company's liability protections ahead of the first trial over the claims in federal court, which could happen as early as June. The wave of litigation in the U.S. is part of a global backlash against social media platforms over children's mental health. Australia and Spain have prohibited access to social media platforms for users under the age of 16, and other countries are considering similar bans.
And Mark Zuckerberg's problems are not limited to the US alone. EU competition regulators have warned Meta platforms against blocking artificial intelligence rivals from its WhatsApp service as they probe suspected abuse of market dominance. The European Commission said on Monday it has sent formal objections to Meta and could impose temporary restrictions, indicating tougher scrutiny as Brussels steps up enforcement of competition rules against big tech.
A Silicon Valley giant is once again in hot water with the European Union. EU regulators have threatened Meta with temporary restrictions to stop it blocking AI rivals from its WhatsApp messaging service. It would come while they investigate suspected abuse of a dominant position by the US tech giant. The European Commission said Monday it has sent objections to Meta over possibly breaking the bloc's rules. It further said it could impose the interim measures to prevent what it calls serious and irreparable harm to rivals. The move is similar to one made by Italian regulators in December. Meta said there was no reason for the EU to intervene. It argued there are many AI options and people can use them from a number of sources like app stores and websites. Meta brought in a policy last month which only allowed its Meta AI assistant on WhatsApp. The EU said its decision on whether to impose the measures depends on Meta's reply and rights of defence. Monday's move further shows the bloc's aim to enforce its antitrust rules. That's despite US criticism of its actions against big US tech firms.